I thought what I would do is talk to you, first of all, about why I wrote the article in response to some of the responses, and then tell you about some of those responses. And there have been, well, thousands, hundreds just directly to me, and it's going to take me a team of research assistants to try to comb through the various comments on the web. And that there's a pattern in them, and I want to talk about that, and then talk about where we go from here, which is something I will now be spending a lot of my time on. So, in the article, I said that being in Washington, the feminist assumptions on which I had built my career were shifting under my feet. Many people read that as some kind of attack on feminism, which anyone who knew me would know was crazy. I'm a proud feminist, and feminism created the options that have allowed me to have the choices, the wonderful choices in the career I've had. So what did I mean? I now know what people think I meant, or some people think I meant, and I've had to ask myself, what did I mean? And I realized what was shifting under my feet was my own assumptions about myself. So it's not about feminism, it's that I'm a feminist, and I'd always assumed that I wouldn't choose work over my family, but I would never choose family over my work, that I would somehow make them work together. And honestly, if you had asked me in 2007, if you'd said you're going to go work for Hillary Clinton, you're going to work for her for 2 years, and after that you're going to be able to move up, and are you going to do that and make it work with your family, or are you going to say no and go home to your family? I'd have said, I'm going to make it work. And I'd have said, and everybody who knew me would have said that. So what changed was actually my own calculation, both about what was needed, my kids needed me, but even more importantly about what I wanted. That was ultimately the key, where I realized, as important as my career is, and it's defined me for as long as I can remember, my children will be home only 5 more years, and it's not that I want to stop working. I'm working more than full time, but I want to work in a way that allows me to have that time with them. I will never get it back. So the first thing to say, and I think it's part of the whole response to the article, is I experienced for the first time something I think many women, I don't know if it's the majority, I haven't done that kind of research, experience frequently. They think, my family is enormously important to me right now. I am going to make work choices that are not the choices I would make if I had a career but no family. If I had a career but no family, I'd just go up as fast as I possibly could. You still want to go up, but you want to do it in a different way, a different pace, because you also want to be with your family. So that's the first reason, that something changed in me that most of the women I grew up with would say, duh, but that was not who I was. The second reason is that I had always said to people, to young women, I've spent my life as a professor, and every woman in this audience probably has spoken somewhere, and a younger woman says, how do you do it? And I had always said, well, you just make it work. And then I would say, I wasn't totally blind, I would say, look, I'm a tenured professor and my husband's a tenured professor, and it really doesn't get better than that in terms of work and family. So I knew that the flexibility was incredibly important. What I didn't know, it's not just important, it's indispensable. It really, without it, I could not do both. Now, I'm going to just say here, this was not a plea to change the State Department, and we can talk about that in questions. The kind of job I had just had to be done the way I did it. But it was to say that I came back and realized without at least the flexibility to be able to go to your kids' things and when they get sick, as I used to say when I was a young dean, an ear infection could wreck an entire week's calendar. Right? It was just amazing. But I could reschedule. That was absolutely essential, and that I had to stop essentially saying you can have it all. I had to start saying you can have it all if you can control your own time much more, and we've got to change that. And the final reason, and this I did talk about, but I want to talk about at greater length. I've always gotten a huge amount of positive reinforcement. I'm a career woman. I was an early tenured professor at Harvard Law School. I was the first woman dean at the Wilson School. I was the first woman director of policy planning. I am used to lots of positive reinforcement, and I like it. Who doesn't, right? It's wonderful. People say, look up to you. You get this sense that you're doing something important for others. So when I came back from Washington, and I was here in New York and in Princeton and talking to many of my friends, my peers, people who knew me, and I would say, and they'd say, why are you back? And I would say, well, Princeton has a 2-year public service leave, and after 2 years, you lose your tenure. That's an explanation everybody's very happy with. That's great. Okay, we get that. You worked hard for tenure. It's a lifetime position. You probably don't want to give it up. No problem. And then I would say, and even if I could have negotiated another year, I would have come home because I have 2 teenagers. They need me, and I want to be with them for the next 4 years. And I got a completely different reaction. People just didn't want to hear it often, or it just didn't fit their vision of what I was supposed to be doing or what I was supposed to be wanting. Or they would look actively sort of like you could see I'd just gone down a notch in their estimation, right? We all respond to these micro behaviors. When someone is it's like somebody suddenly looking over your shoulder at a cocktail party, right? I could feel this. And some people would just say, well, that's really a pity. And they would, and not, if I pushed them, they'd say, well, we need you in Washington. And I would say, well, I appreciate that, and I'm honored, but my kids really need me at home. And as I said in the article, there are plenty of people who want to be director of policy planning. There is a line out the door. I have not seen anyone volunteer to parent my 16-year-old. And I wouldn't let them if they did. So that sense, and then I realized how many women had said to me they were stepping out. And did I communicate that subtle disappointment to them? Did I make them feel like they were somehow not making the really valuable choice? If we're really going to change these things, we have to change the values. So those reasons that I changed in a different way, that I realized how important flexibility was, and that suddenly I found myself on the other side of the positive reinforcement cycle were really why I felt like I had to write it. All right, let's talk about some responses. So it's funny, I go places and people come up to me and they say, I really liked the article. And then I realized, now why did they say it that way? Right? And then I realized, well, that's because they've been in a lot of conversations where people said very bad things. And so they're trying to give me reinforcement. And I think, I haven't been in many of those conversations. Not that many people come up to me and say, that was really awful. Now, there's been plenty of stuff written, and I've read some of it, but I get a lot to do. And reading people attacking me is not high on my list. I will, of course, read it all as I write a book and try to respond to it. But what I've gotten is overwhelmingly positive. I've got hundreds and hundreds of emails. And now every time anyone writes me an email and is a younger woman, it includes, I'm sure you're tired of hearing this. No, for the record, I'm never tired of hearing this. I'm sure you're tired of hearing this, but thank you. So the overwhelming response I've gotten is gratitude. Mostly from younger women, but from women all over the country in all ages and in all careers. So that's the leading sense that I have. I think it's why. I think it's important to ask, why should people be grateful that I came out, and note the term, right? I came out and admitted, hey, I actually want to make a choice for my family. there's something wrong there, and it's worth going into longer. The second, so that's the main response that I get, and it's been powerfully moving as people tell me the stories. Then there is lots of criticism. So I want to break it into two categories. There's the personal criticism, which just means either people read me wrong or I didn't write it right, or some people just don't like what I had to say. Most of it is, she's whiny, she has a great life, she's complaining. Someone said she's a perfectionist. I thought, just look at my house. I am anything but. That is, I think, really a fundamental misconception. I do have it all. What I was trying to say is I'm a tenured professor, and yes, I can make it work with no problem. I'm an incredibly lucky human being, and I only realized that after I spent 2 years working on someone else's schedule, even a boss I adored and admire and consider myself privileged to have worked for. But so there's a lot of stuff that's more, she's whining. And this is silly, and many other people have much worse problems. Yes, I definitely get that. The more important criticism is about what it does to the women's movement. And there are some women who say this is providing an excuse for men not to hire us. That is what I expected to get, particularly from women of my generation or older. I think we're past that. I don't actually think employers have the choice. You want a talented workforce, you have to be hiring women as well as men, and increasingly you're going to have to hire men who also need to make accommodations. So my judgment was 30 years on, we can take this risk. We haven't had a woman as president yet, but I have to tell you this, when John Kerry was at the Democratic convention and he was giving his speech, my 13-year-old said, "Mom, who's that?" And I said, "Oh, well, he's, ran for president. He's the senator. If President Obama's reelected, he might be Secretary of State." And my son said, totally unscripted, "You mean a guy can be Secretary of State?" So I think we're okay there. I really think that they, not that we don't still have a long way to go, but I think we can do that. But the other criticism is that I'm discouraging younger women. That the last thing in the world younger women need to hear is that it's hard, and that they need to make these choices. What they need to hear is you can do it. For the record, I believe you can do it, but I don't just think it's a matter of individual commitment. I think unless you change the work environment, the values environment, the arc of a successful career environment, some women can absolutely make it. But as I said, they're more likely to be those who are either very well off, self-employed, or simply superhuman. And that for everybody else, we actually need to change deeper things. So those are the categories of responses. The third category of responses, which I think is hugely important, is from men. So I got many more responses from men than I expected. I got many more responses than I expected. But first of all, I heard from a lot of fathers. And this was very moving. I heard from guys who probably never really gave this a second thought when they were in the prime of their careers with respect to their partners, but they sure do looking at their daughters who have been educated, comparable to their sons, who have careers, who entered the workforce and suddenly are making trade-offs that mean they are not realizing their ambitions. So I heard from lots of fathers, but I also heard from lots of husbands and partners and guys thinking about getting married. And what they basically said was, you think you don't have it all. Try being a guy who is going to take paternity leave, who's going to take flex time, who's going to actually make the kinds of trade-offs so that he can spend time with his children and support his wife spending time with her children that women do. Said, women are stereotyped, absolutely, but guys even worse so. They're sort of basically not real guys. Real men, no. There's a gender stereotype very deep. In fact, one former special member of the Special Forces wrote me and asked if my husband would please write an article to prove that he was an alpha male. He may at some point. So that That I didn't expect. That's a huge part of the issue. We really have to change stereotypes around men as well as around women, because we're not going to fix this issue unless we fix it for men and for women, for parents and for children, right? This isn't just about parents with kids. This is also about taking care of your parents as my parents age, taking care of your spouse, taking care. All right, so where are we going? Because I think we're out of time. All right. To me, and this, you already heard this, flexibility is absolutely indispensable. It's not everything we need. There's lots of other things too, but it is absolutely indispensable, I think, if in fact we are going to be able to manage our time with our kids and with demanding work schedules. I think flexibility is coming for lots of different reasons that I don't have time to go into right now, but we need to make it such that a competitive, attractive workplace, a productive, attractive workplace, is a flexible workplace, and flexible in a way that allows people to ask for what they need and make for accommodations. So that is the issue that I think I'm going to work hardest on. I think we also need paid leave and other things, but the one I think that is coming and we can change like a tidal wave, is around flexibility. The second is just catching up with the rest of the world. Somebody wrote me today and said, the State Department does not have maternity leave or paternity leave. The State Department has, you can take sick days or vacation days. Now, this is just crazy. The person writing was saying, regimes that are very hostile to women have paternity leave or maternity leave, paid leave. We need to recognize that this is holding us back in the world, that how we handle work-family issues is way behind lots and lots of other countries, and not just Sweden and not just France. Lots of countries we're not going to become. But the final thing I want to say is, and because I think this is really all of us, is to change these values. So a very high government official said to me yesterday, he stepped down after 3 years, he said, everywhere he goes, people immediately say, why did you really leave? So it's what I said in my article. Leaving to spend time with your family is a euphemism for getting fired. And it really is. He said nobody believes him that he had told his wife 2 years and it was 3. So I was also listening to Mike Mullen when he said, what do vets bring to the workplace? And one of the things he said was caring for others. So why exactly, when you think about it in the military context, and you think about Band of Brothers, and you think about the idea that the most important person is your squad, and that's something we glorify, and yet to say, I'm going to not do this thing, take this promotion, stay in this job because of my commitment to those I love, is viewed very, very differently. I don't fully understand it. I'm going to be thinking about it a great deal, but in so many ways, it's not okay to say I put my family first. And yet, honestly, if I'm hiring people, somebody who said, no, I put my work, you have to feed your family, don't get me wrong, but who would say, no, I'm going to do something for the job rather than actually giving my children, my family what they need, I would think differently about that person. I really value people who value their responsibilities to those who are closest to. I think this is a particular issue for women. I think it's interesting because men are presumed to be in the workplace. You get lots of executives, CEOs, they say, oh, his children were the most important thing in the world to him. And nobody thinks that that's a problem. But if you say about a woman, oh, her children are the most important thing in the world to her, then she somehow seems less professional. So we need to change the norms. And I'll give you one final example. When I grew up in Virginia, my mother put cigarettes on the table at dinner parties. I know everybody's looking at me, she'd have little containers of cigarettes. That's what you did. Even I smoked in college, and even through the early 1990s, smoking was cool. It was Marlboro Man cool. It was cool. It was Virginia Slims cool. It was cool. Well, 10 years later, it is not cool. Definitely, it is often a sign of weakness. It's something that people, regret that they do if they still do it. Some of us can still imagine the taste of a cigarette, but nevertheless, it's been a huge value change. We see it differently. We see people who do it differently. We can do this. We can do this. We can do it actually in pretty short order. But it does require not just changes in what we do, but changes in how we think, whom we value, whom we esteem. And that's really up to all of us.